However much we put into the Dhamma, that is how much we will experience of the Dhamma. However much honesty and truthfulness we pour into Dhamma, that will be very proportionate to what we get out of the Dhamma, how much we experience it. However much effort, energy, enthusiastic involvement or desire we put in to the practice and understanding of the Dhamma, that will be directly related with the outcome, whatever we basically experience from the Dhamma. Usually we have an angle, as they used to say. We have an agenda, each of us. We have a purpose, if you will, while we approach the Dhamma, the teachings of Lord Buddha. In this context, that's what I mean by the Dhamma. Sometimes people say, well, especially in the context of relationships, I want someone without baggage, emotional baggage, or something like that. We say that. But most of us, when we come to the Dhamma, we have a lot of emotional, spiritual, other kinds of baggage that we carry and haul around with us. And if you've ever been in any kind of relationship, you know how demanding, how in many cases unfair, unrealistic, and full of strife this so-called relationship becomes. Because there's an element of dishonesty in our approach. Now, oftentimes the person doesn't know this, especially in the context of the teachings and why we practice. Because we have our own ideas, what we've heard. Perhaps we've been impressed by a certain discourse or a certain teaching, a certain teacher. Whatever the reasons might be, oftentimes they are the very last things to be looked at carefully. Instead, we go after the other, more obvious things, the more apparent things, the more even tangible things, such as the bells and whistles, or at least the comments or the statements made by others that we find along the path, including the teacher or teachers, as well as our companions on this journey of quest, of understanding, or at least delving deeper and deeper and deeper as we understand it, of the teachings. Now, specifically, this involves our own practice. of, of the Dhamma. Because oftentimes our own expectations stand in the way. They stand in the way of our understanding. Even when we're reading or listening to a sutta or even the Dhamma Talks that we expose ourselves to, how we understand, how we process, how we absorb. Because oftentimes, many of us use the Dhamma as proxy for something else, as a lid, as a cover, as they say, the cover story. But usually the cover has to have something else underneath it. And that is what I was referring to as the emotional baggage, or in this case, the spiritual baggage, our anticipations and expectations of what it is that we want to get, and especially what it is that we are wanting to get rid of. There's an escape many of us want to have. And yes, the Buddha talked about nibbana as an escape, especially in the context of nirodha, the escape from prison of delusion. That's not the escape I'm referring to here. What I'm referring to here is the escape from doing the work that needs to be done on ourselves. Unfortunately, many people come to the Dhamma expecting the Dhamma to be the everything, basically, the answer to all things. This blissed out state that will, almost like a Swiss Army knife of things, of answers, all kinds of things that we encounter. And that's not the purpose of the Dhamma. Of course, the Dhamma will allow us to have a better perspective. Absolutely. For example, if relationships or your connection with someone is breaking apart, coming loose, and you're feeling tremendous pain, sorrow, suffering because of that, and you want to mend it, you want to fix it, etc. The Dhamma might not be the right tool to come in and try to fix it. However, the Dhamma will show you that the suffering being experienced there by you has everything to do with your longing and attachment to wanting things to be a certain way, holding on to an image, in this case, the relationship, for it not to fall apart. So the Dhamma will allow the person to see one's own involvement in the suffering being experienced. Yes, in that sense, absolutely. And that's why we need to be in the midst of life, in experiences, to see and interact and see the teachings come alive through our own living experience. However, that requires a certain audacity of trust that I'm doing my thing and I'm also looking at it with the goggles, with the lens of the Dhamma, understanding, the wisdom, understanding what is taking place, understanding my involvement, my approach, my willingness to still be fully submerged and identified with these experiences. Hence, the teachings will allow us to have this observing capacity, mindfulness, sati and sampajanya, or sati and panya, mindfulness and discernment, the wisdom. And then all of a sudden we see that, oh, this is beyond just this interaction, this relationship coming apart, whatever the case may be. In that sense, the Dhamma is absolutely essential. And in that sense, the Dhamma is inseparable from our lives. However, what I'm referring to as putting the Dhamma as a lid, as a cover, is when we are trying to substitute it for the work that needs to be done. For example, many of us go to retreats or try to meditate to kind of subdue the noise, to suppress the desires, the inclinations, the things that are going on, to make the fires just be, dying out in a sense, without having done the work of looking at what caused the fire in the first place. That requires the eyesight, the wisdom, the discerning, scrutinizing observation of the Dhamma, to look at things carefully. And this is the problem area with many meditators. Many people who even are not necessarily meditators every day, but they hold on to the Dhamma in one form or another, perhaps in the form of making donations, whatever it may be, going to special ceremonies, retreats, etc. However, the person is comfortable enough to just give in enough to get something back from the Dhamma. That holds us back from truly tasting the Dhamma, because something is gonna miss. Something is flawed in the understanding of the person as to what the Dhamma provides. The Buddha talked extensively on the theme of what is adhamma, what are not his teachings, basically, and also what goes against nature, adhamma. And one of the suttas I was working with recently from the Anguttara Nikaya, from the Book of the Fives, in the warrior section. And the Buddha is giving us warnings of things to come in the future. And specifically, as it relates to terrors or perils, things that cause fear, should cause fear in the hearts of people who really want to maintain a decent life, and a life supported by the understanding of the Dhamma. And what I'm referring to here is what he warns us against: the days, he says, the time period where there will be, for example, he's using the suttas. He says people will not enjoy, and specifically he's talking about the bhikkhus, and because he was addressing bhikkhus here in the sutta, but he's saying how even bhikkhus will have a hard time listening to the suttas, the words of the Tathagata, he says himself. People will have a hard time listening to it, reciting it, or even supporting the exploration, understanding of the suttas the way he has spoken them, uttered them. However, he says, they will lend an ear, they will eagerly listen to statements made by commentators or even poets, he says. Those who write poetry and take the words of the Buddha and add their own nuances to it, using flowery, fancy language and words and things like that. And then he says, such bhikkhus will then consider that to be the teaching of the Buddha. And he says that is adhamma. Because a lot is lost in translation. I'm just referring to the Adhamma part of this because it's a very extensive sutta, and it talks about other things as well, where people don't practice, where people, uh, if starting with the sila, the virtue. Again, he's referring to the bhikkhus, how people look for, let's say, the robes and want to get the finest robes. They look at the food, they want to get the most luxurious food, tastiest, 5-star, 6-star, 7-star hotel, restaurant type of food, basically, 4 or 5 Michelin star food, and forget how to eat scraps of food. It's not the food he's referring to, of course, or the robes. Ultimately, it is the approach that we have. Why am I practicing sila? Why am I listening to the suttas? Why am I reading the suttas? Am I trying to plug the holes in my life? Am I trying to put a lid on the suffering and the sorrow I'm going through? Meaning, am I looking for an easy way out? And yes, that is what most of us keep doing again and again and again. And that is what I'm encouraging you here to revisit with that intention. Why? I always am fascinated with this question. Just so simple, it's beautiful, it's so easy to apply in any context. Why? Previously, when I would do couples therapy, for example, people would come and ask me, can I see them? And then I would see them, and then they would go at each other, this couple. He's like this, she's like this, whatever. And after they really went, fighting and tossing all these things at each other, and suddenly when they calmed down, I would say, why were you even interested in each other? I asked it individually. Why did you think of this person as a person you would want to be with? And after a pause, and they find themselves to be in a comfortable environment, to be honest for a change and truthful, they say the truthful words. That doesn't have that poison and that venom in it. And they say, because how he looked at me, or how she said this, or how whatever. It started from the simple question of why. But we forget to apply why in our own practice. Why am I sitting? Why am I studying the suttas so much? Am I wanting to just add on to my resume or inventory or reservoir of suttas? So if somebody asks me something one day, I'll know how to come back with something that's going to put them in their place. To impress, that's another thing. Or am I trying to really understand? Many people are not trying to understand. They just want to add on and try different tricks, to find different tricks to apply without doing their personal work. And by personal work, or the baggage, etc., that I was referring to, working on our mental, emotional health, our well-being, whether through personal work, journaling, spending time, just walking, running, spending time alone, basically, and just asking oneself that question. Because sooner or later, we're going to get to those knots on the path. in our journey where there's not going to be any progress for a while. That is, unless the person pauses and asks, what are the causes and conditions? Why am I stuck? And that is where we have to really perk up and listen. Listen carefully what the heart says. Ask the question, drop it. Ask the question, but drop it. But be very alert and open to whatever comes. Don't edit it, please. Because when the heart speaks, it will tell you what's up. It will be brutally honest. It might turn around and say, hey, chill out and learn the art of waiting instead of trying to bulldoze your way into Nibbana, because that's never going to happen. I have students who come in and they're like, oh, I want to attain the first stage, the second stage, or whatever stage. And I look at them and I was like, do you know the stage you're on right now? What level? What is this chaos? Do you ever pause during the day and look at the havoc that's going on in your mind? You want your partner to change, you want life to change, you want everything. You have zero respect or care or affection, or not affection, but tolerance and appreciation of your body. Every time you look at your body in the mirror, you're disgusted. Okay, but meanwhile you want to do metta. That doesn't work. You want to change this about yourself, change that about yourself, and we take that mindset into the Dhamma. Well, I see a gray hair, so I have to go and dye my hair. Okay. But how much am I leaning into that? If so happens that they don't have that dye, am I going to lose it? Or if I just let nature take its course and I have a full set of gray hair, how will that sit with me? Will I still be agitated until that is taken care of? And then I'll do my Dhamma. That is what I mean by missing the point of Dhamma. Because we want everything to be perfect. And the same with our worldview. The way we want to see the world around us. Only if this, and that is taken care of, that's when I will feel comfortable enough to really be ready for Nibbana. Okay, it's going to happen any moment now. No, it's not. Too many expectations. So the less and less our list of things are, and we're curious enough to look and read and just open like a very dry sponge, just ready to absorb. The more we'll taste the Dhamma, the more we practice that Dhamma that we just understood because of our openness, and we have the willingness to find out more, genuinely find out more, not to kind of plug it, take this Dhamma thing, the teaching, whatever, and try to plug it in. No, there's leakage. We have to address the leakage. Otherwise, it's like I've always said, like, you know, the trying to put a Band-Aid over a Niagara. Imagine if you can dam the Niagara Falls, okay, or any huge body of water that's pouring with so much force and energy, and trying to put cover up that crack in the dam with a Band-Aid. Despite the fact that the Dhamma is the greatest resource in life, it will be like a Band-Aid at that moment, useless, because we are misappropriating it, if you will, if that term works with this. We're trying to address the problem in an erroneous fashion because of our greed, because of our lusting after something. Many people look at nibbana as an object to lust after. Yes. They completely missed the point. It's just like going after your master's or bachelor's or trying to get a CEO position, toiling and pushing and fighting and this and that, and you got it. The person goes like that. It's the same with anger. It's the same with sex. There's a tension built up. And one of my teachers, Bhante Punnaji, would say this. He would say, the reason why people want to go back to doing that again is because of the release. Right at that moment where the tension is being released, enormous forces are being released. And that release becomes our... So to approach Nibbana with the intention of releasing that tension that has been building up to that moment, and where you go, what a relief. No. That's not the Dhamma. Some teachers are teaching the Dhamma like this, unfortunately. Some students are approaching it like this, sadly. Now, of course, there needs to be the work that we put, the energy that we put, but there isn't that tension release there, because there is no tension building up, because so long as the plug is in the hole, there is tension being built up, because it is based on avijja, delusion. Has nothing to do with nibbana, has nothing to do with the Dhamma. That's why even individuals who come to me and say, I've reached this stage, or I've reached this jhana, they don't know this, but I'm actually observing them, their behavior, the way they speak. They walk into the room, they walk, they look, how they're saying the words. What's their body telling me? Because guess what? When a person does experience Nibbana, you're drenched with it. Every single thing you touch is drenched with it. It leaves its mark. It's like walking through a field of lavender and you step inside a home or somewhere. Well, even the tassels on your clothing, your robes, if you have them, every part of you is going to be smelling, at least for a while, of lavender. So, let alone when we're talking about the Dhamma and experiencing the genuine aspects of it, the culmination, the fruits of it. So for that reason, I always encourage an individual to go back and ask themselves about their true, genuine motives. And what am I trying to get out of this? I mean, isn't that what we ask when we're studying something? Let's say if you're studying engineering, and halfway through the program, you ask yourself, what am I doing? If your heart is not in it, of course. And if your heart is in it, the answer is very clear, because I love it. I want to build things. I want to construct it. I want to understand how things are made, this and that. Wonderful. I know a few individuals who were studying to become attorneys, lawyers. One of them finished the program almost, and the other one did finish the program. But they asked themselves that question, and they decided that being an attorney was not for them. Same with therapists. Some therapists study and have all the hours, thousands of hours of clinical hours, tough programs. And then they get to that point and they ask themselves, why do I feel like I want to do this? And they quit. They decide to. Now, I'm not this, encouraging people to quit. The question is, why am I doing this? Being authentic. And that's all. That's everything to do with the Dhamma. Especially when we come to the practice. And the practice doesn't include just sitting. I've mentioned this many times. The Buddha talks about this all the time throughout the discourses. It's everything you do. It's the way you listen. It's the way you communicate with each other, with others, especially other meditators, other practitioners. The way you listen to yourself as they're speaking. Always checking the mind. Last week we were talking about the incredible value that needs to be given to the mental action. It is the most important among the three levels of action, because that's where it all begins. That's where it stems. That's what we're doing here. That's what I'm encouraging you to do here. What is my motivation? What is my mental action? The nature of it. Is it kusala? Is it akusala? Because we can easily be doing and conducting our lives in an akusala way, unwholesome way, under the guise, under the lid or cover of Dhamma. A lot of people do and say things, whether in the case of bhikkhus, while being in robes, which basically means automatically has to do with the Dhamma, but the actions say otherwise. Where there's pain and sorrow being brought upon others. What is my motivation? Because oftentimes our motivations are the three kileshas, plain and simple. There's greed or lust or attachment. There's hatred, disgust, resentment, anger. And there's just sticking your head in the sand and saying, this is just not my problem. I don't care. Looking the other way. Inaction when action must be taken. To stand up for something. When what we're seeing goes against our values, for example. Because my inaction might be a sign of a hole that I was trying to plug, that I want to be accepted, included in this milieu, in this circle. Well, where is the Dhamma there then? There isn't. So even though we think of the delusion part of the kileshas as something so, not so malignant, not so bad, because it's kind of almost like silent, but it is actually the mother of the other two. Lobha dosa. Moha is where it all begins. If we are deluded, meaning there's avidya, meaning we're not looking at the problem, what it is that this thing is being caused by, suddenly they erupt into anger or hatred or lusting, being provoked by something that causes lust. Agitation also. So what that looking at the delusion part of the kileshas, moha, with those clear eyes means that the person is asking the important question, which is why? Why do I feel like I want to run away from this? Which is what we're trying to do when we're running away from our problems and into the promised land of the Dhamma. But that's just putting the Dhamma as a lid, as a cover, a temporary cover, which is not, it's not even going to hold. That's why you see individuals who have had, different experiences, they say, or jhanas, all of a sudden they erupt when the conditions are ripe for the eruption to take place, because there has not been the necessary attention giving by the person to look at themselves, which means that the person has been basically doing one-pointed concentration, for example. Suppression. Remember the tension? Ooh, it releases itself and it feels like, bliss. Yes. Well, not so fast. So we need to be genuine with our approach, with our understanding, and asking ourselves why. Because if I'm starting with sullied, dirty hands, whatever I touch is going to have that. I won't be able to touch anything supramundane because I'm still functioning on a very, very low level. So is my sila, is my virtuous practice, ethics, to build a virtuous behavior, this character, this new version of me, thanks to sila. If it is there, then it needs to be there fully in all manner of situations. And there must be a change developing in personality. A person who hasn't seen me for 4 years or 4 months, suddenly they see me. That has to be clear. But above all, to ourselves. So if that is taking place, then there's genuineness involved. There's truthfulness involved. So basically, the person is not making excuses. And when we're not progressing in our path, taking a step back and asking ourselves, why? What might be the reasons for this? And not coming up with reasons ourselves, but just to sit with it, basically. Rest in that question, but be open, honestly, truthfully, as to what may come, and not start debating with it. We asked. So let us make the question honest, so that we can get an honest answer. So I will pause here, and hopefully there will be questions. Comments, please.
Thank you, Bhante, for the wonderful talk. I find myself having actually the opposite problem when we were mentioning about the nirvana, that is a problem to lust after it. I had the opposite problem of when I'm attending these sessions of not really thinking much about the nirvana, but just wanting to learn and to be a better person, as opposed to having nirvana as a goal, because I still have to really understand it and be converted maybe into believing and thinking about that. So what would you suggest for someone like me with entirely the opposite problem?
It is a problem, isn't it? And that's the problem. Seeing that there's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
For example, that's good that you're not thinking much about nibbana. Nice, that's good. That means you have one less burden. But then I heard you say that, well, I first need to have this and this and this in my resume in order for me to apply for this thing called nibbana. Well, that is the problem. So my mother used to say to run away from the rain only to get caught up in the hailstorm. It's an old Armenian saying, but that's what I hear is happening here. Because you have told yourself, yes, I'm not interested in nibbana. Whatever happens, I'm just curious. I'm just wanting to learn, absorb, understand. But in order for nibbana to take place, I have to fulfill these requirements, almost in absentia, but it's there. That's what I heard from your words. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I'm not even thinking about that. In other words, I'm really just here believing the philosophy of Buddhism and in enabling me to be a better person in this life and to live meaningfully every day. So not even to get the wherewithal in order to achieve nirvana. So I'm honest when I'm saying that I feel that maybe it's a problem that I'm not thinking about nirvana at all. So that's what I mean by the opposite problem. It's not even trying to get anything on the resume in order to be qualified for nirvana.
I see. Why would there be the need to even categorize it as a problem, though?
I don't know whether it is, but I'm asking you whether you feel that it is because I think when I asked you a similar question previously, and your answer is that, but why not think about nirvana?
Well, depending on the context, we cannot just say, well, you said this, or, it's not like going against what was mentioned previously. The context is extremely important. I've met a lot of people, I've heard a lot of people, students, many of them say, well, I don't care about nibbana. Okay, fine. Are you experiencing suffering? Well, yes. After they really have that heart-to-heart conversation with themselves, they finally admit that, yes, this is suffering. When the person understands that there is, and they also spend the time to understand and to see that, in fact, they're like the dog chasing its own tail, meaning it's a cyclical pattern that they're caught in and they cannot escape. That escape in this context, the release from that very gluey, sticky world of being stuck in a pattern that is a downward spiral, where the person is caught in the first, at least the first two truths of the Four Noble Truths, suffering, and they even understand that their attachment is there. But when you help them, when you put the spotlight on that second truth, they still have a tough time to relinquish the habitual patterns. For that person, it's prison. It's horrible because they're always caught up in this. Now, it takes a certain audacity of honesty, like I was saying earlier, for the person to come to that moment of realization. But even that realization in itself is not sufficient to get them out of it, of that prison. Now, to use a target as to what the release of that prison is, or would be, at least intellectually, for us to understand, the Lord Buddha told us about Nirodha, which is the escape from, or no more prison, or Nibbana. There isn't that movement anymore, that fire. Nibbana, that's what it means. There isn't that fire of longing, of wanting the next thing, the next thing. So even though the person might say, well, I don't want nibbana, it's, you know, it's very secular Buddhist-y way, which I find it to be kind of, you know, distasteful even and disrespectful for Lord Buddha's teaching. Because we want to be modern, we want to, well, I'm not interested in rebirth, I'm not interested in karma, I'm not interested in nibbana, I'm just, no, 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 no. Then this is not, this doesn't have anything to do with the Dhamma, whatever it is that the person is engaged in. There needs to be an acknowledgement what it is. Like if I am in this race, in this Olympic race, let's say 100-meter dash, I need to know where the finish line is. I can't keep running indefinitely, right? So we accept these things when it's on the conventional level, but when it comes down to soteriological or ontological levels, we call it, oh, that's just philosophy. No. Because my suffering has nothing to do with philosophy. I'm suffering, the person says. Help me. And the health, like last week, I think Upatissa was mentioning about where I equated it with the health versus the absence of health, which is sickness. It's the same thing. You cannot constantly want to not be sick and take health or good health out of the equation. So the good health is the nibbana portion of this discussion. So if I don't want to get sick, no more be sick, that my target, my destination is health. Good, solid bill of health. Well, that's what nibbana is. That's why I find it quite unnecessary to even say, well, I'm not interested in nibbana. There's nothing lofty about that statement, by the way. It's kind of stupid when you're looking at it from the eyes of the Dhamma. Because we don't just meditate to get like into a calm state. Well, that's, you know, you can go into, you can do auto hypnosis, do something like TM, transcendental meditation. But just like, you know, go almost into like, yeah, I'm just chill. And then come out, nothing's changed. You still break precepts. And when you're in the right conditions, right, I mean by conducive for it to happen, all of a sudden you're angry, you're lustful, you're doing the same thing, and you're back being the dog chasing its own tail. That's why an individual who participates in discussions or meditation retreats, this and that, when they are still holding on to their old ways of doing things, which takes me back to the main theme of today's talk, they're not going to have any benefits from the practice. They might have a little bit here, a little bit there, understanding, but nothing life transforming has taken place. So I would encourage the person to sit down and see, what do I mean by I'm not interested in nibbana? Does that mean I'm fine here? I'm this is it. I'm okay. I'm resolved in this, you know, I'm going to die one day and that's it. Okay. As far as the Dhamma is concerned, if Lord Buddha was here, it was like, okay, what's the difference between you and a lizard? What have you gained? What have you really understood about your involvement in the creation and perpetuation of dukkha in your life? That's a wasted life as far as the Buddha is concerned. Plain and simple. That's why I was mentioning a few weeks ago about us having this, you know, when we are so blasé, it's almost like a ritual when we even are studying the Dhamma, practicing the Dhamma. When it's superficial, then that person's life, the Buddha would say, it's a sorry case of being a human being. That's why we say human being is, being born as a human being is such a rare opportunity. Because your cat, your dog will not be able to understand one's own involvement in recreating dukkha, recreating or following the pattern, habitual pattern, to say no, to build those boundaries of unwholesome living. Your cat will not be able to do that. Your people are not doing that. 7.8 billion of us. Most of us are not doing that. So, of course, in that sense, you must be invested in Nibbana. But we need to look down first and understand where our feet are placed. What am I standing on? And not completely be neglectful of what's happening. That's why I was referring to the intentionality and having the baggage, which I was whimsically trying to use the emotional baggage that we bring into a relationship. The Dhamma is the best relationship, example of a relationship. What we bring into the relationship, that's what we get out of it. So if I'm spending time with you, I'm I'm interested in being with you, this and that. Isn't there an element of happiness there that I'm getting from this interaction? Isn't that what relationships are after? That sense of, where your central nervous system goes, I feel safe here with this person. And there's growth that comes from that. If you bring it down to the nuts and bolts, that's it. In the case of the Dhamma, we have Nibbana. And Nibbana doesn't happen over there. That's another reason why I discourage people to just say, I'm after Nibbana. Because for that, in that context, so you have to look at it contextually. That's what I'm trying to say, like in anything, especially when it comes to the Dhamma. Many people look at Nibbana, and unfortunately some teachers have taught this way. They look at it as an objective in time and space, over there, not here. But the moment I am relinquishing my attachment to this thing, typically starting with the way I view this thing, my relationship to this thing, etc., and I see the Four Noble Truths in that, in the midst of that, I was like, oh, there's a release. What? A release, which is another word for liberation, which is another word for Nibbana. Mini, small Nibbana experience. Not then, now. That's why the Dhamma is akaliko. It is timeless. It crosses time and space. It happens now. The Dhamma is never about like 2 inches from where you are, or 2 milliseconds away from where you are now. And that's where life happens also. That's where love happens also. That's where truthfulness and honesty happens also. So when a person says, I'm not interested in Nibbana, it's another way of saying, I'm not being truthful with myself. Why am I saying I'm not interested in Nibbana? That's another question. Why? Is it a taboo? Okay, why? There's nothing lofty, nothing having some sense of prestige in saying that I'm not interested in Nibbana. No, we have to go back, because oftentimes even the lexicon, the language that we use, is highly influenced, and therefore the way we think, because much of the thinking is involving the language that we use, and the language that we use is highly influenced by the books and whatever type of exposures we've been having. In the West, for example, there was a lot of Zen and all kinds of influences, Hinduism, Vedanta and Advaita, all these things happening from the 60s, 70s, all these influences. And you have individuals like Alan Watts or individuals like that, which they brought a lot of interesting concepts forward, but they also made a salad bowl where a person looking at Buddhism will look at it through as if it's a salad bowl, and it's not. So my attempt here is bringing the attention back to what is Dhamma, what is not. When a person says, well, I'm just practicing, open awareness. What does that mean, open awareness? When you're getting angry, where is that open awareness? Out the window, that's where it is. That's why you need to have a solid, precise, laser sharp mindfulness object that brings you into that mind state at every single moment. Now, you can use your breath, you can use metta, use anything, but it needs to be precise. So there isn't like, I'm always open and this and that's spirituality for me, that's Nibbana for me, that's Buddhism. No, 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 no. Those days, as far as, that's one of the reasons why I teach the Dhamma, because there's a lot of that junk out there. They've been out there for the last 30, 40, 50 years. That's not my objective. That's why I go back to the suttas. That's why I spend so much time retranslating, recording, and making them available and going over them with you and teaching from there, not the commentaries. Not the commentaries. And nowadays, unfortunately, every one of us has become a commentator. It's no longer Buddha Gosha from the Visuddhimagga. Those were the good old days where you had only one or two commentators in one country or another, and people worshiping that and forgetting Lord Buddha's teaching. Now, every Joe, every Tom, Dick, and Harry, as they say, who has a YouTube channel and knows a little bit or something, is an expert at that thing. And in the field of Buddhism, we have maybe 100 of them every day. So not to go on too far of a tangent, but I think it's very much related here and necessary to be spoken as well. That's why I'm spending the time to go into the different levels of it. It needs to be readdressed, the intention behind me saying, well, I'm not interested, I don't believe in rebirth, Bhante, because I have that a lot. I hear that a lot. I'm not interested in Nibbana, Bhante. Okay, why are you here? Why are you, I just want to live a comfortable life. Okay, I want to have a restful mind. Okay. To you,
sorry. I think I did not make myself clear. It wasn't a matter of not interested, but do not feel it viscerally the way I feel matter. For instance, I'm here, I truly believe in matter, and I believe in Bhikkhu and Buddhists who radiate matter, and that's why I am very into Buddhism. But I do not feel nirvana the way that just because it's so much more abstract than matter. So when you mentioned that, nirvana should be every moment, I mean, I can feel like matter should be every moment. So maybe you can explain the connection between nirvana and matter. For me, it's not like not interested, but I just don't feel it viscerally the way, the other one appeal to me. And that's what I practice. It's not like I want to be calm. I have no problem, trying to be calm with many other ways. But it's just like I believe in matter. And I feel that this sitting is very good for that kind of trying to sila and so forth. But nirvana is just above my head. Maybe that's how I can put it. It's not so much not interested, but that I do not feel it viscerally.
Which is totally fine.
Okay, thank you.
Totally fine because of what you said. It's not feeling nibbana every moment. That's you cannot cause nibbana to happen. It's the conditionless state. But you can create the causes for you to experience metta. which settles the mind, which allows you to go through the jhanas a lot quicker than any other method that I've tried over the years. I have to also add that. It's powerful because it changes a person. Metta. In that sense, of course, don't put Nibbana in front of you. And that's why I was putting the caveat on, please, many people put Nibbana there like, they want to reach a goal. Just like the anger, the release of the tension. It's like, yes, I'm there. I've had people who've yes, now I'm a once returner, or yes, I'm now Sotapanna, and entered the one who enters the stream. No, you're not, because you would know it, and that would be the end of the story for you. You would be it. You would live in it. You would experience it. You don't have to go around telling people. For example, even the jhanas, in fact. That's why I never tell a student the first few jhanas. I never tell them, this is first jhana, second jhana, whatever. Sometimes not even the fourth jhana. I don't tell them. I'm listening, though. I'm very careful because I'm so careful. I'm so invested, if you will, in seeing the person go beyond that stage, because we have a tendency as human beings to look at this, especially if the person has not been exposed to that type of happiness and joy, to hold on to it. Oh my God, I can't believe I'm there. And that way, they, most often than not, they will miss out what's come. That's why as a I try to be a careful teacher with them, to kind of like keep my mouth shut and still gently guide them to go further. But what you just said is, and I'm also appreciative of your previous two questions, although they were in line with each other, of course. Like like a string that goes through different beads. In this case, 3 beads that you offered us today. So I'm grateful that you asked these questions, because it brought up different elements of it added a different nuance or nuances to what I was trying to say in my Dhamma talk that I shared with you. So it's very important what you said, vis-a-vis what it brought out, things that must be spoken and said, but coming back to the metta practice, that's it. Because you personally know, that metta works. That's the end of the story. That knowing will propel you to go deeper into it. Now, there is that faith, though. As you're going into it, there is that faith. In Buddhism, in the Dhamma, we do have faith. One has to have faith in the fact that Lord Buddha became the first Arahant, experienced Nibbana. We need to have that on some level. And most importantly, even more important than that, I would say, is feeling in your heart that I too can experience what Lord Buddha did experience. So when you're practicing metta, giving yourself to it every single day, creating that consistent practice. As you said also, sila, you're practicing sila in an unprecedented way compared to your previous life. Already things are happening. That's giving you the confidence and the faith, supported by the understanding that is minute to minute, which is supported by metta. Absolutely. At that point, who cares if there's nibbana or not? Because you're tasting its fruit. One of the qualifiers of the Dhamma is pacchatang veditabbo vinyuhiti. That means the person, the Dhamma itself is to be realized by the person for themselves. And when you say it in those terms, where you are practicing, and that is the thing which is compelling you to come and sit and practice every single day and be here every single week and sit and listen and be engaged. That tells me something about your practice, about your understanding. So as the person delves deeper and deeper and deeper, the truths become more and more clear for the person. So the faith truly blossoms and the relationship really blossoms with the Dhamma. And then you don't need me or any other person to come and tell you of the of whatever Nibbana is. And by the way, Nibbana cannot be defined. It's not there in time and space somewhere. The Buddha always used antonyms in a sense. We would use like what Nibbana is not as a better way of explaining what it is. But all these are just redundant words because it is to be experienced by the wise. Pachatang veditabho vinyuhi. And as you practice, that becomes your truth. You know it in your gut, viscerally, using your word, viscerally you'll know. And who cares what Bhante, this Bhante or that Bhante or whatever is saying? Because you will be imbibing, you will be soaking like that dry sponge, the juices, the wonderful juices of the Dhamma. And you won't get enough. You're going to listen, you're going to read, you're going to, where is the sutta? Let me read this sutta. Because it's taking you deeper and deeper. So I hope that helps. Thank you for your questions. Other thoughts, comments, questions?
Thank you, Bhante. I guess since you asked that sort of why, I decided to, not decided, but I kind of, sometimes the lectures are a little bit intimidating because, how would you say it? The ideal is it's too pure, too earnest, and it seems really very hard to achieve. So I've kind of I dumbed it down for my daily, not practice, but sort of understanding by looking at it, kind of the Dhamma and things that you have been saying, more like I'm kind of into this sort of Chinese medicine where it's basically incremental. It basically tries to establish a certain state of balance, but actually it requires many substances, even though it looks just like a little package of brown, like ground branches or somewhere and leaves, but actually it's pretty complex. And it's a kind of something which has to takes a certain amount of faith and also a certain amount of consistency. Doesn't always work, but hopefully it doesn't kill you unless you sort of go overboard. So I kind of I mean, this is a sort of maybe a terrible way of trying to make it work for me, but the lectures are a little bit intimidating because it just I think it requires just a lot. And then sometimes I don't feel I have the energy to be so, maybe so 100% about it. So I sort of try to do it moderately, like in terms of, sort of a herbal medicine or something, and go from there, basically. So that's kind of my very plebeian response, or just
Yes. Well, intimidating, you'd say, but you're here every single week. And sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to give credit where credit is due. That's how I view the world. And every single time you ask a question, there's so much honesty, there's so much openness in revealing the world, your inner workings of your mind, if you will, and you try to dumb it down, or etc., like using your term you used, but you're here, even though it's intimidating. And I see that, and I understand that, and it is necessary for it to, I wouldn't say necessarily intimidating, but the Dhamma is intended to be given the way, shared rather, the way it is supposed to be, the way it was taught by Lord Buddha. Of course, we don't have him, so we try our best as it is supported by one's own practice and one's own understanding of the teachings as best as possible. But to kind of give you I don't know if boost it would be a proper term here, but even at the time of Lord Buddha, when he taught, the closest students, and one particular student was his own attendant, Venerable Ananda, his own cousin, who was with him for at least 25 years. Now, granted, Venerable Ananda was a Sotapanna, but he was there, and he would always, he would listen, and he has given some wonderful Dhamma talks himself throughout the suttas. We find several. It doesn't mean that he didn't understand them, even though he didn't become an arahant, but he did become an arahant while the Lord Buddha was alive. Why? I've always wondered about that. How could you not? Unless there were other priorities, or there were at least the desire to kind of titrate, which is another fancy word of what I was understanding from your reasons as to, using the analogy of TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, and how to take, to go easing your way in. Well, I don't know how much time I have on this planet. I don't know how much time you have. Or I don't know how much time we all have on this planet. From a very young age, I was very familiarized with death. It was, for me at least, in my family, it was not accepted. We would just, like, my parents would like, no, let's not talk about death. But for me, when I was injured and traumatized, for me, that became a reality. I knew that death would come and take me at any moment. And I was 8. I was 8 years old. None of the people around me, I saw in their eyes or whatever, in their lives, even to this day, having it be such a reality in a sense. So, and that's another reason why I gravitated towards the Dhamma. And the thing which I love about it is that it is no nonsense. Now, no nonsense can sometimes be interpreted by some of us as intimidating. And you're absolutely right in that sense. But Venerable Ananda also saw that, this could take, let's hold on. Let's hold off on this. Even though you have so many examples where Lord Buddha is urging him, go sit, go. You care too much, Ananda, about socializing, about sitting down with the nuns or going and teaching here or there. Go and sit. Now, Venerable Ananda, of course, could not break a precept. He was already a Sotapanna, he was dedicated. So he was a noble disciple, but he didn't feel compelled enough, or if you permit me, intimidated enough to practice until that very night where Lord Buddha was about to die. And he leaned against a tree and he started sobbing because finally the reality hit. And even as we read in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, how that moment was, it's so touching, it's so powerful. It brings tears to the eyes. Because he realized that moment that he missed such a huge opportunity. But fortunately for Venerable Ananda, Lord Buddha predicts that within 3 months' time he will become an arhat. So again, we don't have Lord Buddha to give us that kind of guarantees. But what we do have a guarantee on is right now your lungs are breathing in and breathing out air. The Sanjiao in Chinese medicine, the triple burners, right? The brain, the heart, the gut are alive. Okay, what am I doing with it? What am I waiting for? What am I postponing for? I don't know if tomorrow morning I'll wake up or I'll even be able to go to sleep tonight. We take it for granted. And if anything we learn from Lord Buddha is not to. Just like if I were to use the reference of a relationship, the moment you start taking the other person for granted in a relationship, that's the moment where the relationship starts dying. That's a silent death. And all of a sudden, well, we don't feel towards each other as we used to. Well, that's it. Or you feel contempt even towards each other. Because one of you at least has taken the other person for granted. But I am encouraged by your presence here every single week. And for that itself, I cannot take it lightly, nor for granted. But that's not enough. Just like Venerable Ananda being close to Lord Buddha, it's not like Nibbana through osmosis. There's no such thing. And there's a wonderful analogy that Lord Buddha uses. He says, even if a spoon that has been used to sip soup with for 100 years, that itself will not allow the soup to ever, the spoon to ever taste the soup. It's a spoon. It will never taste it. Even though it's in that close of a proximity to it. So yes, being here is wonderful. It means you're creating a conducive environment. One of the elements, like using the example that you gave, provided for us of the medicine, the bag of herbs that are given. Let's say 1 or 2 ingredients are pulled out. Actually, now that ingredient might turn into poison. So we need to be very careful. And that's why we cannot cherry pick the 3 trainings, specifically when it comes to Sila. No, I'll do this. I'll do this, but I won't do that. I'll close an eye on this. Well, unfortunately, you don't have the right to do that when it is your own transformation we're talking about. That's why Sila was the very first foundation stone, the very first step in giving you what the Dhamma fulfills in a person, grants a person, allows a person to experience and to really experience that sense of liberation. Otherwise, me cherry picking through the Sila, doing this, but yeah, I won't do that, or I'll do this, but I won't do this thing or that. It's already messed up. The recipe is flawed now. What you're taking is poison and not curative in properties. So that is the warning that I would offer a person if they were approaching me with such a set of circumstances. Again, I'm coming from the teachings of Lord Buddha and how I understand it. But you have to check your own life and see whether the process that you have been adhering to all these years that you've been on this planet, whether they have truly been satisfying to such a depth that have moved you, that you see that you're no longer caught in that dog chasing its own tail downward spiral. And for that, only you can give the answer, I would say. So I hope this is helping.
Yeah, it's very helpful. It's it's like, nowadays I don't say, oh, I'm gonna have a drink, but I'm not gonna kill anybody today. So I've observed one precept and I just sort of forget about the other. So no, I mean you said many times that especially in the West, there's so much focus on mindfulness this and mindfulness that, but without the sort of Dhamma or whatever, then it's kind of mindless, so I mean you have said that many times. So anyway, thank you.
Of course. But on a positive note also, I've been noticing more and more people talking openly about the value of ethics, morality, more so than they did even a year ago. People at least are recognizing there is an absence, and it's a detrimental fact. So that gives me hope that people are, of course, this is from my own experience in meeting people through the Dhamma. I'm noticing that. So there's less and less resistance to Sila from practitioners, which is a wonderful thing. I would be seeing more resistance to it about a year or two ago, because things are becoming louder and louder recently vis-a-vis the absence of Sila, as to where that leads. The lack of civility, breaking into someone else's safety to enforce my own ideologies and things like that even. So protecting that sense of protection of oneself and others, because they as far as Sila is concerned, they're conjoined. So I wanted to mention that too. So Sila, so many people are becoming more cognizant of its value. That's what I'm trying to say, which is a great thing for the Dhamma and their own happiness. Any other thoughts, questions before we close? Okay. All right, let's share some merits. May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find health relief. May all beings share in these merits that we have thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of wholesome happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas and nagas of mighty power, share in these merits of ours. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May you be well. May you be protected by the blessings of the Triple Gem and your own adherence to the three trainings. And that is one of the best ways to protect oneself. So thank you for being here, and I'll look forward for our next session, which will be next week. And I haven't chosen the sutta yet, so I'm debating between a few. So hopefully it will be the appropriate choice. We'll see. Be well. Take care.